After years of lobbying Ottawa to make it easier to bring in more foreign workers, Tim Hortons now says it's committed to hiring more people in Canada, as many as 10,000, as the coffee and donut giant looks to open new locations. So what has the company said about the temporary foreign worker program and its future plans? Well, Sarah Galashan's looking into that for us.
Yeah, so its future plans are important maybe to anyone who might be looking for a job potentially this summer or moving forward, because as you mentioned, 80 new restaurants that they are looking to open across the country, and they are looking to hire 10,000, what they're describing as local hires. And to that, they put out a press release today launching a national ad campaign specifically for that reason. And this campaign, we can show you here, a lot of the pictures, if you look closely, are of young people. And I think that that's the point they're trying to make here. They do say that they are a leader in this country of employing youth. 45%, they say, of their staff are between the ages of 15 to 24. And this is a company, and in this press release, they actually talk about this, that has previously lobbied the federal government for greater access to what's called the Temporary Foreign Workers Program. And they made that lobby as recently as last year. But right now, they say only 3.6% of their employees are filled, or those employee spots are filled by the Temporary Workers Program. And that means an employee that comes from another country at the behest of the employer for a certain amount of time. They don't need to, is what they're saying, look to that program, because there's enough to be hiring within Canada, given the high unemployment rate, particularly of youth in the country. So for that reason, they are using the word local to describe the hiring that they intend to do, and 10,000 positions is what they're looking for.
Now, in a moment, we're going to hear from a senior executive from Tim Hortons about this change in plans. But let me ask you about some pretty significant competition looming for Tim Hortons, the American chain Dunkin' Donuts.
Yeah, an iconic American chain. And Tim Hortons for Canada is really sort of the equivalent, if you were to ask many Canadians. Of course, it's important to point out that it is currently owned, at least partly, by a Brazilian-American private equity fund, but it is an institution, Tim Hortons, for many Canadians. And CBC spoke with a business consultant who said that for Tim Hortons, they are really leaning on that Canadian history here in terms of how they plan to compete with Dunkin' when it arrives to Canada. Take a listen.
Dunkin' has aggressive plans to open a lot of locations next year, but it's still going to be several years before they catch up to the number of locations Tim's has. So I think their hiring local youth is just, again, doubling down on the fact that, we're Canadian and we support local Canadian jobs and local Canadian people, which is just going to be an advantage for them.
Yeah, I mean, so think about it, at a time when, unemployment is high, and this is for many people, a beloved Canadian institution looking to hire Canadians. So look for those ads to be reflecting that kind of sentiment, rolling out probably as soon as this summer.
Okay, Sarah, thank you very much. My next guest is the Chief Corporate Officer at Restaurant Brands International, the company that owns Tim Hortons, among other fast food restaurants. Duncan Fulton, thanks for joining us.
Hi, Ian.
Let's talk about hiring. Less than a year ago, your company was lobbying the government to increase the cap on the number of temporary foreign workers that you could hire. But now Tim Hortons is promoting hiring a lot more Canadian workers. What's changed?
I think two things have happened in the last couple of days. First, we announced a major investment in Canadian communities, with 80 new restaurants being opened this year, 400 renovations, and a $400 million investment, mostly by our restaurant owners. And today we announced a local hiring campaign nationwide, looking for 10,000 local hires for our restaurants, including those new restaurants that are open. Our restaurant owners have always hired locally. I think there's been a misperception around the TFW program. In our case, we have 110,000 team members in 4,000 restaurants. Only about 4,000 of those are TFWs, temporary foreign workers, usually in those areas that are the most rural, remote, hard to find labor in.
Yeah, so I think those numbers might surprise people, because I think there is a perception, and frankly, some of the social media commentary, verges or actually is a little racist on this, but there is a perception that Tim Hortons doesn't hire a lot of Canadians, does hire a lot of temporary foreign workers. But I guess there was a time a few years ago when you had a lot more temporary foreign workers than you do now, right?
Yeah, there was a time coming out of COVID, and if everyone remembers back to 2021, 2022, people were slow to get back to work. People were slow to let their kids get back to work. The government increased the number of temporary foreign workers that the country could have across all industries, manufacturing, agriculture, retail, restaurant. We were certainly there encouraging that to make sure that we were open for Canadians. The reality is our restaurant owners have done 400 local hiring campaigns so far this year. Use of the program is down 50% year over year. We know youth unemployment is high. And at the end of the day, if you own a restaurant, it's just easier to hire locally. Our owners have always believed that, and that's what we're promoting with this new campaign. And I think your viewers will be seeing it on TV.
How confident are you that you can hit that 10,000 number?
I think very confident. I mean, we always hire locally. If you look at the 110,000 team members we have, 96% of them have been hired locally. I think, and look, you raised, the issue of perceptions in the restaurant. The fact is our communities are more diverse today than they were 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We hire from the community. It's always been neighbors serving neighbors at Tim Hortons. And as our communities are more diverse, our restaurants look more diverse. But, coming in, you really have to ask yourself, people saying that folks aren't a Canadian in the restaurant. We have so many wonderful Canadians that have worked for us, that are from diverse communities, that have given their entire life to the brand, that have grown up with the brand, that have become owners of restaurants. Hiring locally is what we've always done.
Workers aside, there's an interesting debate in Canada about just how Canadian Tim Hortons, the company, is. Like, I grew up just outside Moncton, New Brunswick, one of those cities where there were a lot of Tim Hortons early on. So I grew up with the brand. I'm very familiar with it. It is an iconic part of growing up in Canada. But at the same time, a lot of people say, look, in 2026, this is no longer actually a Canadian company because of the ownership. What do you say to that?
I think it is in every way. And actually, I'm from Fredericton, so I understand the perspective that you grew up with Tim's. We have 1,500 Canadian restaurant owners who live and work in the communities across Canada where they own and operate those 4,000 restaurants. They paid out of their own pocket to build those restaurants, to buy those restaurants. They make payroll every single week for plus or minus 30 people that work in their restaurants. They give back to their communities to the tune of upwards of $100 million of the brand, and from the owners themselves, about $50 million. You look at where we buy our products, we're buying $1.6 billion a year from Canadian suppliers. The chairs in the new restaurants are Canadian maplewood, handmade in Montreal. At the end of the day, the brand is led by our Canadian restaurant owners. They really are the heart of the brand in our communities.
Coffee and a donut at Tim Hortons, that's the kind of at its most elemental level, what you have to offer. And there's a lot of competition, right? The McDonald's wants me to buy their coffee, their Starbucks. There are lots of independent chains. And now you've got Dunkin' Donuts coming into Quebec and then presumably across the country. What's the biggest challenge for Tim Hortons right now in Canada?
We operate on a 3-year rolling roadmap. So the food and beverages that you're seeing show up on the menu today have been in design for more than 2 years. The restaurants that we're going to be opening this year, those 80 new restaurants, those have been in the pipeline for a couple of years. Competition's always made us better, and we look forward to competition. Our focus right now is building out what are we doing in 2 to 3 years from now. I'm actually standing in our test kitchen. Every single new menu item that a Canadian will try at a Tim Hortons comes out of this kitchen in downtown Toronto. It's our headquarters. And our focus right now is looking at what comes next in 27, 28, 29 for the restaurants. And the team's brewing up some exciting stuff.
Duncan Fulton is the Chief Corporate Officer at Restaurant Brands International. Thanks for speaking with us.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate it.